Good morning. I'm Claire Kramer from the bank's outreach team, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about intelligence that our team has gathered from the hardest hit areas following the storm. Just a little bit of background on what our team does. We are focused on gathering intelligence, local intelligence about emerging local issues with a particular focus on economic and financial concerns. And what we do with this information, we try to identify knowledge gaps or programming gaps that the New York Fed would be uniquely poised to answer and to work with other local organizations on. And when we determine that analysis is necessary, we share that analysis with local organizations. We also partner with them. And we can talk a little bit about that in perhaps the Q&A period. We have cultivated ongoing relationships with a variety of community organizations, business groups, and government agencies throughout the region. And in the days and weeks following the storm, our team conducted over 40 conversations, interviews with service organizations that were operating in the hardest hit areas. And examples of these organizations are local, federal, state, housing, and small business authorities, economic development organizations, and also a variety of chambers of commerce. And the focus of our conversations was really to determine emerging themes that were facing small businesses and housing concerns in our region. So what I'm going to do is highlight a couple of the themes that we've identified from these organizations, the conversations we had with these organizations. And the first trend or theme that I want to address is related to small businesses and what's top of mind for them. They're really focused now on access to credit. As you know, that there were many collateral losses, property damage, machinery damage as a result of the storm surge. And one issue related to this is, of course, that damage of property or machinery is damage to collateral that one might pledge against a loan or line of credit. And so, for example, in conversations that we've had with business organizations, this is top of mind for many construction firms that would be well poised to actually benefit from the reconstruction efforts. They have contracts waiting, have business opportunities, but unfortunately can't get the financing to replace machinery or equipment that was lost during the storm. A second issue, and this is broader than simply construction firms, is the need for broader capital. There's been very great interest in SBA loan programs that are at favorable terms for businesses. Of course, we also hear that businesses are shopping around. They are considering SBA, they're applying for SBA loans, but they're also looking to their community banks and other providers for loans to replace lost property and equipment and to get their operations up and running. In the more immediate term, of course, there's often a lag in a loan application. So many firms are looking for gap financing, and that's just short-term operating, to finance short-term operating expenses. And one development that we have seen is there have been a number of loan programs forged by public-private partnerships. One example is the New York City Department of Small Business Services has a loan program, a short-term loan program underway, capped at $25,000 per business. And the idea is, again, to provide that short-term, low-cost financing. There are other programs that have been forged by the New York Bankers Association in partnership with New York Business Development Corp. An example from New Jersey is Hudson County Economic Development Corporation's program. And these are just a few examples. Many other authorities have been working in this vein. Many of the programs are similarly structured. The idea is to have very favorable loan terms, roughly around 2%. The idea is, again, to have this, they're not going to replace all of the damaged property. The idea is, again, the short-term financing. Okay, a second theme that is emerging is businesses are really reporting that they are concerned that their insurance coverage isn't going to necessarily make them whole, and also that they're very concerned about the time lags that are occurring with insurance providers. Now, first, as we know, many companies lacked flood insurance, and much of the damage that was caused by the storm was a result of surges due to salt water. Second issue that they're reporting related to insurance is that many, particularly service firms, had business disruption insurance, But unfortunately, they're reporting that there's variation in policies. Some policies do not cover damage due to water, wind, or power outages. The third issue, and this is probably not surprising, is that the number of folks who are looking to speak with their insurance providers unfortunately exceeds the number of adjusters that are out on the scene. Now, it should be stated that insurance companies have responded, and many of them have deployed mobile operations to the hardest hit areas, specifically to meet with businesses. But again, there are some lags. The third theme from our conversations is that business trade groups are really important engines of recovery. And by this, I mean the businesses that were located in areas that had a very robust business infrastructure, meaning active chambers of commerce or other business improvement district organizations, for instance, were better poised to get information early. And this was very important because though many business organizations and representatives themselves were disabled in the days after the storm, they used social media and they used their websites to push out information about emerging programs to their business constituents. And so, for example, I had noted the loan programs that have emerged, the gap financing programs. Well, these are a first come, first served programs. So there might be $10 million in a fund. The earlier you get into that application process, the faster you're able to get a decision and to get funds for your business to rebuild. We've also seen an interesting trend of self-help cooperatives and exchanges among business owners to share resources, to share office space. Many of them are cohabitating in the days after and weeks after the storm. Fourth, and this is longer-term considerations for many businesses, but I think that it's important to highlight some of the considerations that they're making about their investments and their location decisions. So first, as far as investment is concerned, firms that were operating on the waterfront are clearly now thinking about whether they should invest in generators that they didn't prior to the storm. The question is where to locate these generators. Where are they going to be safe, and what would the cost of locating them in non-basement facilities be, for example? For renters, the question is, if they have insurance coverage, but they have a short-term lease and they're dependent upon a rental agreement, is it worth taking the money and reinvesting in a rental facility that might actually be precarious and may not be long-term? Longer term, there are many relocation considerations that are underway. And in particular, we've heard from a number of entities on Staten Island about whether or not it might be more attractive for them to relocate their operations to New Jersey or to higher ground areas in New York where land might be cheaper and where they think that their facilities might be safer. And then thirdly, longer term, for those who might be approaching, business owners who might be approaching retirement age, is it time to just, are the losses so substantial that it makes more sense to actually close shop? All right, I'm going to turn very briefly to housing. I think in the short term, shelter is the top priority for all housing authorities. Our estimates based on conversations with New York City housing authorities is that 40,000 New York City residents need shelter. This is an estimate based on conversations that we had with officials 2 weeks ago. So take them with a little bit of a grain of salt here, but this is likely to be actually a little bit of a lowball estimate for the following two reasons. First, many families that didn't necessarily suffer structural damage but had losses of power, hot water, heat, and so forth, chose not to move. They felt safer, they felt more secure in their own residences, and so elected not to be displaced. And second, many public housing tenants didn't evacuate. They chose not to evacuate because they had heard stories post-Katrina about condemnation of public housing facilities and were reluctant to take that chance about the ability to move back in. So what's going on with housing in terms of the response? There are many counseling and service resources available, and I just want to take a minute to highlight a few of them. State housing task forces have been formed, and their objective is to identify housing priorities, to calculate vacant rental housing units and to take stock of them. And I should say that these state housing authorities are really the entities that are setting priorities. So they are working with FEMA, but the local housing authorities are the folks who are essentially setting the landscape and are working with FEMA to set priorities. More locally, there are housing counseling and service programs that are available. And so I just want to highlight two of them. Neighborhood Housing Services of New York City and Asian Americans for Equality have developed emergency loan programs for homeowners who are in trouble and are in the hardest hit neighborhoods. And over the long term, and one organization in New York City, the Center for New York City Neighborhoods, is going to be deploying special resources to support housing counseling and legal services for homeowners. Those who may be filing insurance claims, may be dealing with FEMA claims. And just as an interesting side, and in relation to this last point, there's an infrastructure that was developed post foreclosure in the aftermath of the foreclosure crisis, and entities like Center for New York City Neighborhoods and other local organizations are able to use that infrastructure that was built in the aftermath of the foreclosure crisis to actually deploy resources and help storm victims. So I'm going to, with that, turn over to Jason Abel.